Welcome to Ellevate Louisiana's November Education Committee meeting. I'm Julie Stokes, CEO and founder of Ellevate. For today's discussion, we're joined by Dr. Jenna Chiasson, who serves as the Deputy Superintendent of Teaching and Learning at the Louisiana Department of Education. Dr. Chiasson leads statewide efforts to strengthen teaching and learning for nearly 800,000 students. She guided educators and families through the pandemic with strategies that minimize learning loss and advance student growth. A former English teacher and district leader, she's championed early literacy and educator development across nearly 200 school systems. Dr. Chiasson holds degrees from Nicholls State University and a doctorate of education from my alma mater, the University of New Orleans. Thank you, Dr. Chiasson, for joining us today. We're looking forward to hearing from you. So with that, we'll hand it over to you to get us started.
Thank you, Julie. Good afternoon, everyone. Or I should say good morning. We're still in the morning. Good morning, everyone. It's so nice to see you all here today. Thank you for joining. It's nice to see some familiar names in the group today and some friends. Happy to be with you all to talk a little bit about current state of Louisiana K-12 education. So over the last several years, we've seen some significant progress in K-12 education in our state that we're really proud of. This really indicates that our strategy is working, and we've, felt really fortunate to be highlighted in national and local news as a standout success story in American education. Coming on board to the department 5.5 years ago during the time of COVID, we were really faced with a very daunting task with far too many kids who still, couldn't read or do math in our state, all exacerbated and highlighted by the time of the pandemic with school closures. And so I think the education community has just been so strong over the last 5.5 years in their dedication and effort, from our stakeholders to our teachers in classrooms, to families, to the policymakers who have all really rallied together over the last 5.5 years to say, we want something different here in Louisiana. We want something different for the students of Louisiana. And so we've seen significant changes happen in the K-12 education landscape. And as a result, some really strong progress so far.
Well, it's so exciting. And thank you for your hard work on that, because it means a lot to all of us to see these improvements.
So I'll highlight next some changes in our ranking. And so the nation's report card, which is released every other year based on our NAEP progress, on the national assessment, which is given in 4th and 8th grade reading and math, has shown some continued improvement since 2019. We saw an uptick in 2022 to going from 49th in the country. Remember when we used to say, thank God for Mississippi, as we stood in that 49th place. And then in 2022, we saw that uptick to 43. And of course, just last year in 2024, we're really just so proud of this new ranking of 32nd. And you see that comes with progress in both reading and math. And I'll say that, some folks have said, well, of course, the ranking in Louisiana went up because other states dropped, but the ranking in Louisiana went up because our skilled score actually grew in both reading and math, especially in 4th grade.
16, to go from the 40s to 16?
Yes. And I'll talk a little bit later on in the presentation about some of that key literacy work that led to that ranking. But we did lead the nation in 4th grade reading growth for the 2nd consecutive cycle of NAEP. We were top 5 in the nation for 4th grade math. But something that I think we should all be especially proud of, and that not many states saw, is continued progress for students with disabilities and economically disadvantaged students. There was also the release of the Education Recovery Scorecard, which tracked how states have recovered in education since the pandemic. And we were rated 1st in reading recovery and 2nd in math. We improved in reading and math when many states continued to decline. And we were noted as the only state where the average student has completed their recovery. So of course, we're
Amazing.
so proud of this historic progress, but we know that far too many students in our state still cannot read and do basic mathematics. And so the work here is really not done. But what this data tells us is that the strategy is working. And so there's lots more work to do around implementation of all of the strong policy that's been passed here over the last 5 years.
Fantastic.
So just wanted to highlight what we call and what Dr. Brumley, our state superintendent, likes to call our BRAVE plan for education here in our state. And it's based around 5 key pillars. And it matters because it's a clear focus on core academics, teachers, families, and options. And so we'll start with back to the basics. So for both literacy and math, really going back to this back to the basics approach, highlighting and prioritizing basic foundational skills, especially for young learners in those key concepts that they need to know in order to matriculate into higher grade levels and understand, more advanced concepts in both reading and math as they see more complex text in reading, that they're asked to analyze and comprehend. And as in math, they matriculate and are asked to really involve themselves in more application and conceptual understanding. So really highlighting and lifting up the importance of those lower grade levels. We've done quite a few things in those lower grade levels to lift up this back to the basics approach. And we really feel very heartened by what we're seeing in our statewide literacy screener for kindergarten through 3rd grade students. We're seeing continued growth from one administration to the next. And they now take that literacy screener statewide. Students take that in kindergarten through 3rd grade 3 times a year, beginning, middle, and end of year. And we see continued progress in each cycle of that administration. The second pillar is around redesigning the high school experience. And so this is something that I think we all can get very passionate about when we think about what's going to happen to our students post their K-12 experience. So how do we make sure that they have opportunities, no matter what area of the state they live in, around work-based learning, that they have access to those industry credentials, early college credits. And so we've done some work to revise the Louisiana accountability system for education that will reward schools and school systems for doing more work in high schools to better prepare students for what comes next. Pillar 3 is around really empowering parents. How do we make parents really the drivers of their own child's educational journey? And so how can we enhance parental choice and program and course selection? And how can we provide clear communication and transparency for families so that they know about their child's progress and what options are available to them? And this is all just around the mindset that engaged parents will equal better student outcomes. We also have really lifted up how we value teachers. And so how can we recognize and empower teachers? We know that the teachers in classrooms are doing the real work day in and day out with students, and we trust them to do that. And so we've had some key initiatives like the Let Teachers Teach initiative that our state superintendent, Dr. Brumley, and Governor Jeff Landry worked hand in hand on to really say that we want to allow our teachers the opportunity to do what they want to do, which is teach in the classroom. We want to make sure that they have that clear path to engage all of the students in their classroom and that they are free from distractions, burdensome paperwork, bureaucracy. And so that Let Teachers Teach work group released an initial report, and we've seen some policy changes. And I think we'll still have more to come around how can we ensure that teachers are really allowed to teach in classrooms every day. And the next pillar is really around broadening educational options. So how do we make sure that there are great options for families where maybe there have been none in some areas of our state? So this, of course, is through the Education Scholarship Account, Louisiana Gator program, and through expanded course choice. And so this is really just a mindset that one size does not fit all, and how do we offer some tailored options for every learner? So I'll pause there. That was just a broad overview of the educational strategy, that BRAVE plan for education. And then I have some slides next just to overview the new accountability system that was approved by Bessie this past year.
One of the things that I always look to are the rates of people dropping out. And, I'm in the New Orleans area and it's worse in Orleans, Jefferson, St. Bernard. Right around here, there's plenty of pockets of worse, but it's like 25%. I noticed that statewide, it's only like 16%, maybe something like that.
Mhm.
And I wonder about for some of those kids, what can we do to get them into a trade with a certificate? And is there something about the way that we're set up that's stopping that from happening? Or what do you think's going on there?
I think that's what that expansion of high school opportunity is all about. That is that pillar in this initiative is how do we engage students at a younger age, so that they know the opportunities that are available to them and they have some of those opportunities in a high school setting. And so we're seeing some really creative things happening throughout the state, where high school students are being, provided opportunities to internships, to apprenticeships, so that they see that forward path for themselves outside of high school that may not be a university setting, but still leads to a high wage job.
Yeah. Right. And are there any barriers like are there I feel like there used to be and maybe there aren't no longer GPA requirements for getting into the dual enrollment like to go to community and technical college.
There are still some GPA requirements. I think that's something that we're always in conversation about with the Board of Regents, working with the Workforce Commission on how do we remove these barriers so that students are given access, but also our new accountability system that I'm about to overview really places a lot of stock and a high weighting in some of those foundational courses in high school that we think is especially important to prepare those students. We think by putting a lot of accountability in some of those foundational courses, that we should really see some improved instruction and effectiveness in those courses, which will lead to better outcomes for students and them being more prepared for what comes next in the later years of high school.
Yeah, that's good news. So LA Gator, do we have any idea of what the ask is going to be for funding for that this year?
We don't at this point. I think that's something really in conversation as we see, the usage of the program this year. And I think as we see, what is the desire for the program.
Right, good.
So I'll start with just, when we began to revise this accountability system with the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, we really had to pause and say, why do we have an accountability system? What is the purpose of an education accountability system? And we really circled around the fact that, it's meant to improve student achievement. It's meant to drive adult actions to improve student achievement, provide an accurate assessment of performance. And of course, it's required by federal law for us to have this in place. So just a little bit of background. Back in June of 2024, the board did adopt a new system that I'll outline here today. And we call this new system Grow, Achieve, Thrive. And it does go into effect this school year. And we've provided some simulated transitional scores before now. But in the 25-26 year, a school's grade will be measured by up to 9 components for elementary, middle school, and up to 12 components for high school that I'll outline in the next few minutes. But all of these set the expectation that our students here in Louisiana will grow, achieve, and thrive. This is our old accountability system, which I won't even take the time to overview, but other than I have it here on this slide just to show that it is a very complicated system. And there are achievement levels on the LEAP assessments that count for different amounts of points that go into this really complex weighting system. And is really something that just to explain the old accountability system would probably take me about an hour. And I'll be able to explain this new accountability system, I think, in a pretty simple way in just the next few minutes. So just to show you that this was something that we were really aiming for alongside the board, and this was, I think, a desire of the board, was can we get to a system that people can really understand, that stakeholders can really grab onto? And so there were some fundamental drivers behind this, one being high expectations. we know that high expectations for Louisiana students had to be at the forefront of this new accountability system because we believe that they can do this. And so I also believe we have to be the first as the adults to believe that Louisiana students can do high level work and can be successful. So we wanted to set some high expectations for the schools and school systems for student achievement. We wanted to make something that was really simple and transparent. And so it's all guided by one simple question: what percent of the school students met the expectation? So every component is, did they meet the expectation? Did they not? And we knew that we wanted to be transparent about what percent of our students are mastering grade level content, who's on grade level, who is growing, and are they on track for life after high school? And of course, we wanted to really be driven by that career and college readiness. We wanted students to arrive in high school and help them on their pathway to life afterwards. And so I'll start with grow. The growth components are included in the calculations for K through 12, and it just asks a simple question. What is the percent of students who are growing in ELA? What is the percent of students growing in math? And then there is additional weighting for the lowest 25% of students in both ELA and math, and a component for the percent of students growing in English language acquisition, and those are the English learners in our state. And to do this, we just cut the achievement levels in half. And so there's a low category of unsatisfactory and a high category of unsatisfactory. Low and high approaching basic, low and high basic. To show growth, a student must grow from a lower level of the achievement level to the next level. And the question is just, did they grow or did they not? If they're already at mastery, which is considered proficient in our state, then they need to grow at least 1 point because they're already there. They're already at proficient, but we still want to make sure students are growing. And then if they are at advanced, which is considered above proficiency, they would need to remain at that advanced level. And so we show this here through this graphic where you see the achievement levels below proficiency broken in half. And you see each grade level across the bottom. So it's this idea that by high school, a student is reaching proficiency, even if they're starting at that lowest achievement level. And there's double the focus on the lowest achieving students, which is why that lowest 25% is given extra weighting, because those are the students who need to grow the most. This is the scorecard, which every school in the state will have a really simple, easy to look at scorecard. And you see, this is the grow column on the left, and it's just the percent of students growing. The numbers that you see are the Louisiana numbers for the state. So 39.5% of students, of Louisiana students, are growing in math. And for each row, it's just, did they meet the mark or did they not? What is the percentage of students who met the mark? The next column is achieve. And this column will just answer the simple question, was the student proficient or not? And remember, in our state, proficient is mastery. And so this column will ask the percentage of students who demonstrated proficiency. They were on grade level in English language arts and in math, the percentage of students who demonstrate proficiency in science and in social studies. And these are all judged by the LEAP assessment. And so students must score a mastery or advanced, and if they do not, then they are not counted as proficient. So this is the second column of the scorecard. Were they proficient or were they not? That's achieved. This will be the scorecard for any school that does not have a graduation cohort. So this is any elementary and middle school scorecard. The Thrive component is added on for any school that has a graduating cohort. So any high school, any 612, any K-12 school, if you have a graduating cohort, you'll also include the Thrive component in the last column. The first component of Thrive is the percentage of graduation cohort who earn a diploma no later than August 31st of the expected graduation year. So this is the graduation rate. Are you graduating on time? And Julie, this goes back to your question about dropout. So we want to reward when students are graduating on time with their cohort. The next is the percentage of students earning at least a 20 on ACT, a 1040 on SAT, a 67 on the CLT, a WorkKeys Gold or Platinum, or 59% or better on the ASVAB. And so the next part is the nationally recognized assessment. So are they meeting the mark? Is the student meeting the mark on a nationally recognized assessment? And we note here that TOPS university students, if they are on that university pathway, they have to take either the ACT, SAT, or CLT because those are all considered university track assessments. The next row is the acceleration index. And so there's an accelerator that's added on. And this is what really will drive schools and school systems to ensure that students are on their way to having something ready in hand for life beyond high school. And so this is where schools can earn additional credits here for AP, dual enrollment, for high quality credentials like registered apprenticeship, certificate of technical studies, or you see in this last category, they could also be have made the decision to join the military and have a signed military acceptance letter. And so this is really the goal that students will leave that high school experience with something beyond just a high school diploma. And there's a simple calculation for Thrive as well. Schools will earn a 0 through 100 for each component where the student met the expectation. And so this is the scorecard for the state of Louisiana. And you can see that the average for the state of Louisiana comes out to a 40.9 because for each one of these, we're asking that simple question, did students meet the mark or did they not? So this is the percentage of students who meet the mark currently for each one of these. And this is the actual grading scale, because when you see, I feel like we need this next slide on the cut scores, because you see that 40.9 and you ask, well, what does that equate to? We're on a letter grade scale. And so we were able to use Florida and Mississippi both have very similar scales. We were able to look at their cut scores. We were able to look at where schools would fall currently and design these cut scores.
What does this mean, cut scores? What does this mean?
So this shows where each school and district will fall for a letter grade. So a 40.9 would put us at the state of Louisiana. We would fall under district because we have, schools with graduating classes and schools without graduating classes. So a 40 for a district would be a C. So the state of Louisiana is currently a C letter grade.
So bell curve wise, I guess that is normal.
Yes, and the cut scores were designed using a bell curve.
Yeah.
There is a trigger in the policy that says that each time 50% or more schools on a scale earn an A or a B, the following year, the scale will go up by 5 points. What has happened in our current accountability system is that 70% of Louisiana high schools are an A or B. And so we're seeing the opposite of that bell curve effect, which means that it was time to change the scale. And so there's a trigger in this new policy where when that bell curve shifts, that the rigor will increase. So again, Grow, Achieve, Thrive accountability system is really just all about setting those high expectations, prioritizing student growth, proficiency, that career and college readiness. It aligns to our priorities for students with how we measure schools. It's really meant to be clear, transparent, and pretty simple to understand, or at least much more simple than the previous system. And that's accountability.
All right, so a couple of questions on there. First, one that's always on my mind. When the LEAP scores came out and it hit the newspaper, I felt sad because I felt like we were doing so poorly, and it was so I don't know, demoralizing, right? But then you see this NAEP news come out and we all feel so uplifted. Is our goal of mastery, is it too much? Is it too much? Is the LEAP, I just worry that we're a little demoralizing for the kids, for the teachers. If we're doing well on this national exam, why the leap?
I would say LEAP proficiency is still very important. I do think mastery is the right bar. Mastery is a high bar, but Louisiana students can do it. And I'm a big believer that when expectations are high, students will rise to that challenge and that occasion. I think our whole goal is that we are doing an increasingly better job of preparing students at those younger grade levels. I believe that will pay off in dividends in years to come as we see them matriculate through the grade levels. And they reach 6th grade and 7th grade, able to read better than they ever could before, able to do that foundational math, and then performing at grade level. So I do think mastery is the right bar. It is a high expectation. The LEAP assessments are not easy. They are a high bar, and that mastery is a high bar, but I do believe that students rise to the occasion and that high bar is the right bar for Louisiana students.
And I see that Cheryl. Now, Cheryl, you're in the background there, but you're a chairman, so you don't have to be in the background. You could come forward and ask a question.
Yes. So I guess one of my questions, and I've had it on the chat, was, of course, we're hearing from our systems that some of the changes in this new accountability system, especially for the high schools, are driving a much higher focus on testing than what the previous did. And, and typically the, things that Bessie puts in this system, accountability system, is what drives schools in the directions that the things that they focus on. And we're hearing some of our school systems, especially, with their limited resources, saying that with this change, they're going to have to change some of their focus from some of the things like dual enrollment and some of these early college and stuff to the focus on testing more and ensuring students meet the mastery level and above. And I was just wondering if Jenna and them are hearing the same feedback, and if they're seeing some of the shifts already or not.
That's a great question, Cheryl. I am, my team and I are beginning to see some shifts, but I would say the shifts are on student learning in those foundational LEAP courses. That's what I refer to them as, that English 1, Algebra 1, geometry. We're seeing a shift to more attention being focused on those, the amount of student learning, teacher placement in those courses, the importance of materials being, high quality materials being used in those courses. And so what I would hope is that systems are focusing on the amount of student learning, not just the assessment itself, because if students are learning at a high rate in those courses, then they'll undoubtedly be successful.
Well, and I guess that's the thing, is their focus those items on, which in a way puts us almost at if they're shifting back to that from a long time with laws and such being passed, that's really pushed us to focus on all of these extra learning, being prepared for colleges and careers through the dual enrollment, early college, and having degrees. I think that's a tension that we're hearing from our systems, that it's putting them between deciding what you guys have made as important in an accountability system versus what the legislature has said is important through laws that they've passed. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's something we're continuing to support our school systems and our schools with.
All right. So I think we're good to go ahead and go into literacy.
Okay, great. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about. It has been really just this concerted effort over the last 5 years. It's so nice to have Jenna on today, who has been really a partner in crime around this Louisiana literacy work over the last 5.5 years. And Jenna chairs our literacy commission, our state literacy commission. So I wanted to just highlight, this is some of the policy and some of the implementation that has taken place. But when we see that 16th and 4th grade reading on NAEP, we see the tremendous growth that we've experienced in reading over the last since 2019, over the last 6 years, the question is always how has it been done? And I really do, believe that it has been this concerted effort, this momentum that we have been able to drive across groups in Louisiana. This is truly a bipartisan issue, and it is something that everyone has been able to come together on, whether it's the families of students, policymakers, from our state board to the governor, to the legislature. Everyone has really been so involved, and I think rowing in the same direction, which has led to so much of the change that we've been able to institute so quickly as a state. And so just a few things I wanted to highlight that has been accomplished through policy and then implementation. The first thing that Dr. Brumley and I did when coming into the department was institute a literacy team. There was not a literacy team at the department when we came in 2020. And so Dr. Brumley carved a small team out without adding to the department. We were able to just recognize some efficiencies that could be made across different teams and begin carving out a literacy team. The literacy team started as a team of 3, and now we're at about 20 literacy team members who are able to really travel across the state and provide implementation support for all of the legislation, the policies that have gone into effect over the last 5 years. And I think this literacy team has worked really tirelessly to do that work. And then some of the earlier things that were put into place were this requirement of a science of reading training for K-3 teachers and leaders. And the science of reading is just, that term just refers to the methodology in which we teach, that we teach children to read. And so really embraced this method and this approach to teaching reading. Is the culmination of lots of research on how students best learn how to read. And so kindergarten through 3rd grade teachers and leaders were required to go through this pretty substantial training over the last few years. And we were also able to shift policy that would update teacher preparation coursework and the assessment that teachers entering the field have to take, which will make a big difference for years to come now. So where we won't always have veteran teachers having to take the training, but we'll have new teachers entering the profession with those updates having been made in their coursework. We also put into place a statewide literacy screener and progress monitoring 3 times a year. So students in kindergarten through 3rd grade take a beginning of year, middle of year, and end of year literacy screener. That comes along with mandatory parent reporting. I think that is an especially important piece because no parent should have to find out at the end of 3rd grade when they get those LEAP results from their child that their child is struggling. And so this gives a much earlier warning to teachers, to school leaders, to parents that the child is struggling and needs support in reading. And so I think that mandatory parent reporting is really key here. From there, from those screener results, it's also required that students have reading plans and that they have interventions if they are reading below grade level. And so they are getting additional time to learn, additional supports put in place to provide them with the support that they need in order to reach grade level in reading. We've also had a literacy coaching initiative with funding for schools that have academic labels. So if they're struggling academically, they actually received funding for literacy coaching support. And I think that has been key in really building the capacity of educators in the state around their knowledge and how to teach students to read. There was also a law that banned 3Qing in classroom curriculum and resources. So 3Qing is, yeah, that's a great question. 3Qing is, some would call it, you may have heard of balanced literacy or a whole language approach. 3Qing refers to a 3Qing model, which is a method of teaching reading that encourages guessing words based on meaning. It could be based on grammar and then based on visual cues. And so 3Qing is something that became pretty popular several decades ago, where students were really taught to guess what words were rather than sounding them out through a phonics-based approach. And so 3Qing has now been banned in Louisiana classrooms. And so we did the work to refresh our curriculum reviews and ensure that curriculum and resources that used 3Qing were no longer in classrooms, and all the materials being utilized in classrooms now align to that science of reading approach, which is a phonics-based approach.
That makes sense.
There was also the third grade promotion legislation that went into effect last year, which many of you probably heard about, which says that students cannot enter the fourth grade if they are performing at the lowest level of that third grade screener by the end of the year. And so this looks like students at the end of the year in third grade, they take that literacy screener. If they are performing in the lowest achievement level, which is the well below level, they are given 2 additional opportunities to take the screener, and schools have to provide additional learning opportunity remediation in between each administration. They do have what's called some good cause exemptions, where students are exempt from this legislation for things like a diagnosis of dyslexia, if they are in special education. So there are some exemptions from this law, but this was modeled, of course, after the Mississippi legislation back in 2013, that we know really was one of the things that made a very big difference in Mississippi in helping increase their reading rate. And so last year was the first year of third grade promotion. We are still gathering the data on how many students it actually impacted. But it did say that the student either had to be retained in third grade and provided additional supports, or if they received that exemption, if they were on that list of exemptions and went on to fourth grade, they also had to receive extra supports in the fourth grade. So those are just some. I felt like I wanted to give like a kind of like a best of highlights here of some of the changes in literacy that have transpired over the last 5 years. But this, of course, it is not an all-inclusive list of all the work and the policy that has been done around literacy, because undoubtedly I left off some, but I think these are some of the most important ones to highlight today.
Awesome. One of the things I think of right off is, how much might a program of early childhood education improve our outcomes? Because that's one of the things we always talk about, is that when kids show up to pre-K to kindergarten or first grade unprepared, not knowing their letters and stuff, they start out so far behind. Do you see much of that?
So we're actually doing a very deep dive into that data right now, Julie, because this is our third year that we have our statewide literacy screener data at the beginning of the year. And we actually are just getting that data. We were just looking at it this week. And we actually plan to release it in the next 2 weeks, our statewide beginning of year data for kindergarten through third grade. And what we're seeing over the last 3 years and this year again is a lot of our kindergarten students coming in very unprepared to access kindergarten skills and learning. And so we are digging deeply into that data to really decipher how many of those students had an early learning experience, how many were sitting in a pre-K 4 classroom in a school setting offered by a school system, how many were in a childcare center in a pre-K classroom, how many were at home for that year. And so we're really digging into that data and looking at it very closely to see what can we do to ensure that more students are entering kindergarten, because we're seeing such a large amount of kindergarten students enter who are unprepared to begin kindergarten. And this is happening. I mean, this is now happening year over year. And what we see is during that kindergarten year, there's a ton of growth. Our kindergarten teachers are doing a phenomenal job at growing students. We see that data just increase. But the question still remains, what would happen if they would enter kindergarten more ready for kindergarten? And how would that change some of those later grade level results?
Exactly. Well, good. Well, I see that you have another section to move on to, high dosage tutoring.
I do. This is the last one. I wanted to just talk a little bit about high dosage tutoring. This, of course, impacts literacy, but it also impacts math. So just wanted to highlight for you all that there are 2 high dosage tutoring programs offered in our state currently, both a result of legislation and state funding. One is an outside of the school day model for tutoring. It's called the Steve Carter Tutoring Program, named after the late Steve Carter. And it offers an option for families to apply for outside of the school day tutoring for eligible students in kindergarten through grade 12 in both reading and math, so that they can access tutoring from an approved provider. And all of these providers come in, they're screened by us and approved by us, but the family gets to select either in-person or virtual tutoring, depending what's available in their area. And so that Steve Carter tutoring program has been in place for a few years now. The other is our Accelerate high dosage tutoring model, which is meant to provide high dosage tutoring for eligible students within the school. So during the school day, because a lot of research around tutoring, of course, tells us that it's more impactful when students can access it during the school day and not outside, where you don't have distractions or transportation. And so $30 million has been made available by the state the past 2 years. There was an appropriation for high dosage tutoring for kindergarten through 5th grade students. So I'll dive a little more into each one of those, but the Steve Carter, the outside of the school day program, is kindergarten through 5th grade. It includes both literacy and math, and it's a $1,500, we call it a digital voucher that parents can access. The parents don't actually receive the money, but the money goes to the approved vendor once the tutoring session has taken place. And there was a $5 million appropriation for the Steve Carter tutoring program for this year. And we were able to direct an additional $5 million of federal dollars due to federal flexibilities this year into the program. And our numbers for this program have really expanded substantially over the last several years since it began. It was modeled after programs that several other states started, but they have not seen the numbers and the desire for the program like we have here in Louisiana. We are going to be able to serve about 5,000 students this year with the funding available, but we have over 16,000 students on a wait list for this program right now. So there's definitely a desire for the program.
So are they on a wait list because of availability of tutors or money?
Money.
Okay. So we could use more than $35 million then.
Well, and there's a $5 million for Steve Carter for the state appropriation, and then we've directed $5 million of federal dollars. So that's $10 million total for this program. But yes, we have over 16,000 students on a wait list for this program right now.
Well, gosh, I want to see them get in there and get their high dosage tutoring.
Yeah. So really, I would say just an unbelievable response to this program that we've received. And it was slow at first. We first started this program back, I believe, in 2022 or early 23. And when we first started the program, it was a slow response. But as we engaged with, more media campaigns, got the word out, we really just saw this huge uptick and now have this large wait list. Unfortunately, fortunately and unfortunately, great that families have the desire for it, but unfortunately don't have the funding to serve all the students who want the services.
Is it mostly younger kids or older kids? Or is it
mostly
just
younger? The wait list is mostly younger, but it does go up through 12th grade. So there is the option for things like ACT tutoring. So we've definitely seen families wanting things like that for high school.
It just goes to show you, though, that there is a spirit of excellence out there. We just need to get the power in people's hands to reach,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Families do want what's best for their children.
Yeah.
So we have to empower them with the program so they can make decisions around that for sure.
Yeah.
And the next program is just the within the school day model, what we call it our Accelerate tutoring model. So this is kindergarten through 5th grade students who are performing below grade level in reading or math. And they're provided with expanded academic support per the legislation that passed back in 2024. This means either that they need to be placed in a class taught by a highly effective teacher based on their teacher evaluation, or they need access to high dosage tutoring. School systems are provided an allocation on that $30 million. It's a per pupil allocation, projected allocation. School systems do have to submit a plan to us for approval outlining what they're going to do with that money. There are some very tight restraints on how that funding is used by systems. They have to use it for the actual tutoring to either pay an employee of the system doing the tutoring so they can hire tutors. We've seen a lot of school systems hire retired teachers actually to do their tutoring, or they can partner with and contract an approved vendor. Again, that has to come through our vendor approval process. And so we've seen school systems really do a mixture of both, but it's for students who are below grade level, and it has to follow these parameters based on the legislation. 3 tutoring sessions a week, approximately 30 minutes. There is a small group size because all the research around tutoring really points to that, about 4 students per tutor. It has to be sustained for a minimum of 10 weeks, and they have to use high quality materials within those sessions. So those are just the key program elements. So this is the second year of that Accelerate high dosage tutoring model. And we're really supporting our systems this year in ensuring that those sessions are really high quality, that we're getting, it's a lot of money. It's a large investment by the state. And so how do we make sure that what's happening during that time really has the most impact on student learning?
So that one's more governed by the school and the other one's more governed by individual application.
Yes, the Steve Carter tutoring program, I'll say, is really run by the department at the state level, but families are making the choice about what vendor they use. The $30 million appropriation, is divvied into school systems, and then they are choosing their vendor partners or who they hire. And, we have lots of guardrails in place for the funding, with fiscal monitoring, with on-site monitoring, really making sure that, we're taking the responsibility for how that funding is used out in school systems to make sure that it's used in the most appropriate way to have the biggest impact.
Dr. Chiasson, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. It's really been great to learn more about these key areas, in our education policy. And it's conversations like this that really help all of our members understand how policy translates into real progress in classrooms and communities. And I guess thank you so much for your work and commitment to the students in our state. We really appreciate you very much. And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us and being part of the discussion. We hope you have a great rest of your day. If you're interested in these types of policy talks, check us out on Ellevate Louisiana's website, where you can learn more about our events, our policy committees, advocacy efforts, and how to join. That website is ellevatela.org. ELLEVATELA.org. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it.